I was searching for happiness. I just wanted to be happy. I wanted to be able to be my own person and do my own thing, and I wanted to be happy.
Gwyn Lewis first came to Latin America in the early 1970s. Like many other young Americans, he had left his homeland in search of a simpler life, cheaper drugs, and if possible, a chance for happiness.
We were just really tired of the way it was in the States. We knew it was a messed up world. The war in Vietnam, fighting in the streets, black people hating white people and white people hating black people. We knew that wasn't the way things were supposed to be, but we had no answers of our own. My big question, and the thing I struggled with, was why? Why are we all here? Why do people live? I mean, there's nothing to live for, and there's no real reason to be. Our whole thing with the dope was, it was a search to try to find a way out of a world that wasn't our fault. Turning inward with the dope, trying to get the perfect hit where we would kind of space out and never come back, find nirvana, and then we wouldn't have to deal with any of the things we didn't understand. Our dream was that someday we would be able to have enough dope to where we would not have to worry about anything. And everybody in the world knows that here in Latin America is where it comes from. And when we got here, we really found out that it was true, everything we had hoped for, the cheap dope and lots of it.
¿Cuánto vale los chanchitos? Cinco cada uno, ¿no?
I think the first thing I learned how to say was, "Donde puedo conseguir," which means, where can I get? And then I would just add the name of the drug I was looking for. And eventually I developed a chain of connections that could get me anything in any quantity that I wanted. And that became our means of support.
Bueno, gracias.
Finally, the inevitable happened.
Manuel, ve por el otro lado, por ahí, salga. Policía, queremos entrar. Policía, queremos entrar a la casa. A tu casa, pon la mano atrás. Quiero hablar contigo, Camilo, viene aquí. Tenemos que ir para la estación de policía ahorita. Caro, más para el carro. Estoy seguro que los esculquen primero antes de que los metan. Vamos a ir allá en otro control, hombre acá y antes de que lo metan para adentro, alguien los esculque para ver si traen contrabando.
We build up walls that block our way by what we say and do. Sometimes they grow so very high we never can get through, and we are prisoners of our lives. There's no mistaking doing time within the walls of our own making, doing time.
After the first couple of years, I always wanted to stop using cocaine, but I never could. And every time we'd do a deal, I didn't want to do it. You know it's wrong, but that doesn't hurt as much as knowing that you can get busted and spend a lot of time in jail and lose everything that you have. And Puka and I used to talk about this a lot, you know, especially after we had Bo, because we became more aware of the chance of going to jail And what would we do with Bo if we got busted, you know? We had tried to get pregnant, and when we found out that Puka was pregnant, we were just really super excited. And I remember when Bo was born, I delivered him myself. I made him a promise that morning that I'd always be there. And, you know, here was a time when he really needed me, and I couldn't do anything about it.
I really wanted to have a baby. I tried as much as I could to control the drugs I used when I was pregnant. I still could not quit completely, but I cut back a lot.
¿Dónde agarraste la coquiana? ¿A qué se la compraste?
The guard took me up next to the questioning room. They didn't take me inside, but they showed me inside that Gwen was in there. Apparently, they threatened Gwen with the fact that they were going to torture me unless he gave them some information or signed this confession.
¿Quiénes son tus amigos?
They tied his thumbs together behind his back and then hung him by his thumbs.
¡No entiendo! ¿Dónde está la No sé. ¿Dónde está la coquina? No comprendes todavía.
But Gwen signed the paper, and then they let me go back to the cell, and Bo was still there, and I think I just squeezed him for about a half an hour, you know. I just never wanted to let go of him because I didn't know what would happen.
My name's Jerry Levin. I'm from the American Consulate. I found out that you are here in this prison. How have they been treating you? Green, you've been arrested on a very serious charge, the selling of illegal, dangerous drugs. In addition, the police claim to have found a cocaine laboratory at your house. Unfortunately, there's not much the United States government can do about that. However, I think I can assure you that that won't happen anymore. And, by the way, Puka and Bo.
You saw them?
I saw them.
Do you think they'll get out?
I'm going to see what I can do about it. I don't promise anything, but I think I can arrange their release, although they'll probably be deported back to the States.
The American Council was able to get Bo and I released. I had a chance to see Gwen unauthorized. I snuck down to see him on my way out for just a brief moment, and I gave him all the food I had left and all the blankets I had. I didn't know if he had blankets or anything. I had gotten a hold of a couple blankets by then.
And it was really difficult to see her being shoved away by some guards to an unknown fate. I didn't know where she was going. I didn't know if she was going to be going to a nearby country or if she was going to be deported back to the United States. I didn't know. And on visiting days, Saturdays and Sundays, and Wednesday afternoons, the families of the prisoners were allowed to come right into the inside of the jail. And I'd see other guys, you know, where their families would come in and they'd be playing with their kids or sitting next to their wives. And it was really tough because I had just no idea where they were, what was happening to them. The first time I went to jail, I was about 13, and I was caught stealing cigarettes. They called my dad and told him if he wanted to come and get me, he could, and he chose not to.
The judge took me in a side room and told me right then that now we can put him into the detention home for a week, or we can release him in your custody. And at that time, I think I was so upset and, that I said, no, I think it'd be better for him to put him in the detention home for a week. But at that time, it was one of the biggest decisions I think I've ever had to make. I was not a good father. For some reason, I just couldn't accept him.
My dad was gone a lot of the time, and I missed him. I wanted to have a dad, and I didn't.
I wasn't spending much time with my family, and not only Gwen, but my wife too. And so there's a lot of things that happened at that time that could have been prevented with a little bit more communication.
My mom and dad ended up getting a divorce, and so I rejected all the things that kids do with their dads, going to the Little League game and going to the basketball game and being a jock. But I didn't have my dad to help me and teach me how to play ball or whatever, you know. So I just rejected all the values that went along with my parents because I didn't want people to think that I couldn't have something that I wanted.
The only reason I can think of Gwen's going on drugs is because he could feel this wall growing between his parents and his security was washing away. I do remember many times he kept saying to me, Mom, I don't want to grow up. I want to stay little. And I used to say to him, but Gwen, you can't. He went on drugs by the time he was 16 in high school. He was always a leader of sorts. He was very, very smooth-talking and interesting, and kids really liked him, but he had no confidence in himself.
I got some money from somewhere, I don't remember where, and I was able to buy my way into the better part of the prison. It cost $20 to buy your way into what they call a reservado. That's a cell with just a few guys in it, and you have your own bed. The reservado was a lot nicer. You're just super bored, but the last thing you want to do is sleep during the day. If you sleep during the day, then that means you can't sleep at night. You'll do anything you can during the day to stay awake. Read, play cards, go out in the yard and just walk. I mean, it's just so many hours a day that the human body can sleep. And as long as I'm occupied, I don't have to think about everything. You can just put it out of your mind and just pass time. That's a pretty key thing, is just try to pass time. When you're in prison, the longest period is the 5 or 10 minutes between when you turn on your light and when you finally fall asleep. Because that's a time when you're just laying there and you can't help but think about being out. The rats weren't very bad during the day. As a matter of fact, you hardly ever saw them during the day. At night, man, I could just hear them running all over the place. You really didn't see them as much as you heard them. I guess you get used to the bugs. We're always covered with fleas and head lice and, you know. I think one of the most difficult things about imprisonment was wondering just where Bo and Puka were. Turns out that she was deported to a nearby country.
My passport had been stamped that I was an unwanted drug addict and that I was not to be allowed back in the country. So the first thing I did was get a new passport. I washed all the stamps out of my old one and traded it in for a new one. And then I went in through a different city than I was deported from, and really I didn't have any trouble at all getting back in. Gwen had learned to make other things in the jail. He would make purses and wallets and things like that. And so when I first got back, I would take those things and try to sell them to stores and just people on the streets to make a little money. And that's how we got money to eat and pay for my hotel room where I stayed. The first thing I tried to do was make some kind of plan about how I was going to get Gwen out of jail.
Under Napoleonic law, which is the law of the land, the burden is on you to prove yourself innocent. You can do this any way that you can. You can get a lawyer and have him do it, or you can try to do it yourself.
And I found a lawyer, but I had a couple problems. My Spanish was not that terrific.
Costo, no tengo ninguna idea yo del precio de un asunto como ese.
I was really good as far as talking to market ladies or buying food and doing things like that I had been used to. But when I got in the city and was talking to professional people, judges and lawyers, it was like a whole new language, and I really was not fluent enough to express myself very well.
Entonces, ¿cuándo puede ir a la...
The second problem was that we didn't have enough money to pay a lawyer.
We wrote to everybody we knew asking for money. Our parents sent some too. Most of the money that we used for the lawyer came from old debts, people that owed me money. Every once in a while something would come through and we'd be able to give it to the lawyer then. But it was difficult because, you know, you don't know what this guy's doing with your money. You know, he's downtown and I'm in jail, and there's, you know, I can't go to his office and, you know, keep him honest. So we just had to trust him. I think the thing that the lawyer did that irritated me the most was that to get us into the mood to give him money, he'd tell us that I was going to get out. He'd say, oh, it's looking really good. I've got really good news for you. I've been to see the judge, and he's going to make up his mind tomorrow. You know? And he'd get us all built up, thinking that, hey, it's going to be all right. Everything's going to, you know, the judge is going to make up his mind. He's going to tell us what the sentence is. And I can remember one time when I had all my stuff packed in the bags, and I'm waiting to get out, and waiting, and finally, you know, late in the afternoon, they call my name, and there's Puka. She's crying. Hi, Pook. It's going to happen?
No, not today.
Yeah, it's just really difficult. You get all your expectations built up and you think you're going to get out, and then it just kind of, well, maybe next week, he'd say.
I had been trying to get him out of jail for months, and all I ever got was invited out to go dancing or to dinner or something. See, all the judges were men, all the lawyers were men, and most of the secretaries were men, and they all knew that my husband was in jail. They were more interested in, you know, did I want to do a little hoochie-coochie or something, than they were in getting him out of jail. I mean, I had to put up with that constantly, every day. I mean, every office I went into, they asked me, do you believe in free love? That was the favorite question, because at that time, that was the reputation American girls traveling around had, you know. I mean, they didn't care I had a baby. That didn't make any difference. Half the time, it seemed to me like they were trying to keep him in jail. If they kept him in there long enough, maybe I would finally, you know. And he didn't know that was going on. He had no understanding of that. He would say to me, well, why didn't you tell him this, or why didn't you tell him that? I mean, why didn't I tell the judge or the lawyer such and such? Which is what a man would have said walking in there. Well, here, I was a woman, and I had no papers. I was an illegal alien. I mean, I was scared to death all the time. I was going into these legal offices where policemen came, and judges came, and lawyers came, and, you know, I hardly dared open my mouth. I had no money. I had no rights. I was illegal, and I was a woman besides. So, I mean, I was powerless. There was really nothing I could do.
Want to give it a try? We gotta go. I'll pass it on.
Ready?
Thanks for coming, man. Good to see you again. Sunday afternoons after visits were the longest period of time to spend in prison because, you know, you've just spent the whole day with your family, and then they leave.
You lead the way, okay? We're coming.
It's a hard feeling. You're glad they came, but boy, it's really tough to see them go.
Wait a minute, you got a hug for Dad?
Thanks for coming. Good to see you. Bye, Mom.
Bye.
You just want to be out so bad. You know, you want to be with them and to go out and take care of them and just be free. See you later, man. You take good care of Mom, all right?
We build up walls that block our way by what we say and do. Sometimes they grow so very high, we never can get through, and we are prisoners of our lives. There's no mistaking, doing time within the walls of our own making, doing time.
marched down very slowly. I think about 9 months had gone by. We were tired and sick, and a fellow came to see us. His name was Jerry Reed.
Gwen Lewis?
Yeah.
Jerry Reed here.
All right.
Nice to meet you. Why don't you sit down? I'd like to bring you greetings from your mother.
My mom?
Yeah. I just came down from the States, and she heard I was coming.
How do you know my mom?
We met in Chicago the other day and talked for just a few moments, and I said, well, you know, I'm going down. I'd be happy to, send you greetings along.
The first time I met Jerry Reed, I thought he was a cop. He didn't look anything like any of my friends. He had real short hair and clean shaven and wore a suit and a tie. What do you do?
Well, I work for an organization down here. We work with people. We have schools here and medical clinics.
And it turns out he wasn't a cop. It turns out he was a missionary. And if there's anything I was more afraid of than cops, it was missionaries.
When I talked to Jerry Reed, I told him, I warned him, I said, you remember, Jerry, now be sure not to say anything about Jesus, because that's the quickest way to turn these kids off.
We took a very hang-loose approach to reaching out to Gwen and to his girlfriend, Puka. I remember Puka came to the house. We offered, use our washing machine, whatever you want. And so that started the relationship there.
He had a wife and children, so I would take Bo over there and we'd wash out our few clothes. Bo would play in their house and get a cookie out of the cookie jar and stuff. They had a washing machine, a kitchen with a stove and a sink, a refrigerator. I lived in a hotel and shared a bathroom that didn't work with 45 people.
Gwen.
Oh, how are you doing? How are you?
Well, fine. How you doing?
Oh, all right. Good to see you.
And so we just took this approach, hang loose. How's it going, man? And I think here being is more important than anything else. Came by the other day. And we just spent time, tried to be helpful.
Yeah, it was nice. Yeah, well, I really appreciate, I appreciate you and your wife, too, the way that you've just really been friendly to her.
I was concerned for, Bo has that cold and it's raining now. She's out in the streets. I wish there's something we could do to help you.
I guess there is something you could do. I've got this lawyer that's,
is that, she mentioned Johnny something?
Yeah, he's not doing a whole lot. And, Puka has a hard time because she's a chick and she's, like, single. I come in here and she's out there, and it's just real hard for her to try to...
They had a lawyer who'd quickly taken all of their money, about $2,000, and now he wasn't doing anything for them. And they were really hung. And so I went to the lawyer's office, started to put the pressure on him. I'd ask him what he said, what he'd done. He'd tell me what he had done. I'd go to the courts to check out, to see if it was actual, the thing that he'd said he had done. In many cases it wasn't. He'd not done it. I'd go back and call him on it, and pretty soon he saw that we were very serious in closing in on him.
It really made a lot of difference to me to have a man come with me to these, see the judges and the lawyers, and certainly his language capabilities helped a lot.
Hey, I got you some more books.
Oh, out of sight.
Listen, I don't know, this is...
hey, I will read anything you got. We were just completely opposite on every conceivable level. Socially, economically, politically, just completely opposite. And no common ground. Not only was I not a Christian, I was very against the church and everything that it stood for. But there was something about him that I liked. I didn't know what it was, but I liked him.
Here it is. This one, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
And he started loaning us books. Of course, most of his books didn't really interest me a whole lot because they were Christian books. And, even though I had a lot of time to kill and I loved to read, I didn't want to read that bad. But one day he brought along this C.S. Lewis novel.
C.S. Lewis has written. Well, I gave you one of these books. Remember the Lion?
Yeah, the kids' books.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's great. I really liked it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I thought it was really neat.
What did you think? Did you sense anything there?
I thought they were pretty good.
Jerry, yeah, he was very careful not to turn me off, not to try to push his theology or philosophy on me. He was very careful not to do that. It gave me the feeling of saying I was important and I had a right to think however I wanted to.
I'd listen to him, listen to his theories on religion, and it was hard, because sometimes I felt like nailing him and showing him he was wrong, but I didn't think that I would really accomplish anything at that point.
That's all anybody wants, just to be happy. You know, we're not. That's our goal, and this is one way that people can be happy. They get in touch with themselves and with with the universe, and it's just one way like that.
Our friend Jerry just seemed to accept us for what we were and didn't judge us in any way. I guess that's why we liked him so much, because we were so comfortable with him and didn't feel that we needed to apologize for anything that we were. But we had the feeling that this was a guy who had found whatever it was that we had been looking for all those years.
Every time we really needed him, he was there. But even with Jerry's help, things still go pretty slow. The judge had to decide 6 or 12 years because I had all this evidence against me. So it wasn't really a matter of getting out or not. It was just a matter of finding out what it was going to be. If I was able to do something else, like, bribe a judge or something like that, there was a possibility of freedom.
Somewhere in the middle of all that, a fellow came down from the United States, and he didn't know that we had been busted, but he had our name as a cocaine connection.
And he told me that he wanted to buy some cocaine. And he said, I'll give you $1,000 if you just introduce me to the people I need to know to get it. With $1,000, I could even buy a judge. So yeah, that's what I wanted to do. I decided, okay, I'm gonna do this deal and get the money and buy my way out of jail. I wanted to get out. And I figured that would do it. Puka was going to have to do all the introductions, so she was going to have to, risk quite a bit. Take this guy down into the bad part of town and make the introduction and then get the $1,000.
I made arrangements with them to do it on a Tuesday morning, but it never happened because the Monday night before, something happened that made me change my mind. I had been over at Jerry Reed's house that day to wash my clothes and get some books. And with them, he gave me a copy of Good News for a Modern Man, which I took just to be polite. And that evening, in my little hotel room, I was looking through this pile of books, and I picked up the Good News for a Modern Man, and I was looking at the pictures. The only way I've ever been able to explain what happened next is simply to say that the Lord spoke to me. Now, I don't know if I heard a voice. I don't know if you were there, if you would have heard a voice. But what I do know is that I had an overwhelming experience of the reality of God. God wasn't something that I had spent much time thinking about in the past couple years before that. But somehow, that night in South America, he made himself known to me. And I knew that there was a God, and not only that there was a God, but that he was a living God, and that he knew and cared about me personally. Then the next day, I was a little bit nervous about seeing Gwen. He expected me to show up with this money, which he saw as his freedom. I didn't know what to tell him about the night before. I really had no words at all to try to explain my experience. And even if I had, I really didn't think he would understand them. I was kind of afraid he just thought I'd flipped out or something. After you've been in jail for over a year, your perspective gets a little distorted. And I knew that he wasn't really assured that I was doing all I could to get him out.
I'd gone to jail 11 o'clock in the morning to visit Gwen. And while we were talking, Puka came in. And when she walked in, I saw something I'll never forget. And later, talking with Gwen, he recognized the same thing. She was a changed person. There's something about her. I won't say she was glowing, but it is if she were glowing. her face, her countenance was such that you just couldn't help but wonder what's going on. And so we carried on the conversation as if nothing had happened, and I left the jail a few minutes early to leave Gwen and Puka alone so they could talk about whatever they wanted to talk about.
I took him his lunch, and I just told him that I hadn't done the deal and that I had no intention of doing it, and that I didn't think we should ever do another one.
Boy, it was just really a crushing blow because, you know, here I was looking at this as my freedom. But she looked so good. Saying no really did something to her because she looked better than she had looked for a long time. I didn't know what to think.
Jerry had been waiting for me outside, and when I came out, he said, "What happened to you?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said that I just really looked different, that he could tell by looking at me that something really incredible had happened.
And there I took out my New Testament and in detail explained to her how she could know Jesus Christ. I said, essentially, you've come to know him, but let's look at this. And there we prayed together, and that was the beginning of, kind of the formal beginning of this new life in Christ for her.
We spend our time expanding minds to find what we're about, but we must learn to turn inside if we are to get out, and we are prisoners of our lives. There's no mistaking, doing time within the walls of our own making.
It was kind of funny. It was like just in an instant, all of a sudden I realized that God was real, that he really was there with me at that moment. And then I remembered that in a book that I had gotten from Jerry, one time there was a tract, one of these little story things on paper that you see people handing out.
That night, I got a note. The note said, "Dear Puka, I don't want to blow your mind, but I've decided to ask Jesus into my heart."
And the next day, boy, I was scared. I had no idea how she was going to react. And finally, it's around noon, and they call my name to go to the Prevención. And the day before, I ran down, but boy, this day I was kind of walking pretty slow because I didn't even know she was going to be there. She was there all right, and she was smiling.
On Thursday, 2 days later, I went back to the jail, went upstairs, waited for Gwen to come out of the doors of this special rat-infested room down at the end of the hall. It was the best room in the place. And I'll never forget it. For the second time, and the only time I've ever seen this in my life, it was this, as if his face was glowing. Here comes Gwen, a changed person, just totally changed. And I saw this look on his face, the same kind of thing I'd seen in Puka's.
And in the mailbox was this letter from Jerry Reed. Well, as I opened the letter, it was an awfully thick letter. And there was a couple of lines there by Jerry, and the rest of it was a letter from Gwen. Well, naturally, I was excited to see how Gwen was doing. And when I opened up the letter, the first thing I saw was, "Praise the Lord." And he said, "I'm writing to you, Mother, because I know you'll understand."
For the next 6 months, I spent most of my time, and Puka also, in the hotel. We spent most of our time studying the Bible and trying to find out who Jesus was. John 5 and 11, it says...
there we began, I call our seminary in jail. It was discipleship.
There was a period of readjustment that came with all that early Bible study, of building a good, strong foundation that we never had. Just because I became a Christian, it doesn't mean everything got better after that. It wasn't like get saved, get out. It wasn't quite that easy. I didn't know if I was going to be there for 12 years or 6 years or what. And I had to deal with the possibility of staying in a prison like that for 12 years, because that's what the sentence for a cocaine laboratory was.
And all this time, constantly, we had been told almost every day that tomorrow would be the day that the judge would pass sentence or would let Gwen out. And, you know, we knew better than to believe that, but still, when you want a little hope, it's really easy to see some truth in it somewhere. So we had been there for a year really thinking every day that tomorrow was going to be the day, and it never was.
Come here, I'll teach you how to make a hole in the letter.
It was very frustrating. We never knew from one day to the next what was going to happen. It came to the point where we had to deal with what was going to happen if I was going to spend the next 12 years in that prison. But I think I was finally able to face that possibility.
There's probably one dimension of this whole story that can never fully be told this side of eternity, and that's the role of prayer. We always look at the people who are involved and we think that, man, that guy was great, or look what he did, or, you know, he was a wonderful person, or what a sacrifice. But there's something underneath, more basic and more important, I think, than any of the things that we did, or any of the conversations I might have had, or anything I might have done, or anyone else. And that's the fact that a number of people were praying. And as we sort of went through the months, the weeks, the months, and almost a year in this situation, we became very much aware of the large number of people who were praying. And God heard and God answered.
And with Holy Week, 1 week before Easter, when the judge finally decided he wanted to get our case off of his desk, he called Jerry and said that he was going to review the evidence. The evidence consisted of a box of bottles of chemicals and marijuana and things that we had had in our house.
But lo and behold, the last judge to deal with this thing in the court went to look at the evidence, and there was none. Everything, it either evaporated or had been stolen, used, and there was no evidence whatsoever. It was absolutely gone.
And he was pretty amazed. He decided he could not sentence anybody without any evidence against them. So he wrote out a piece of paper that's called the La Boleta de Libertad, and that means a ticket of liberty.
About 6 months after I received Christ, I was released from prison. It had been 16 months in total from the time when we were originally busted until the time that I was finally released. God had answered our prayers. We prayed that he would intervene, and he certainly did, and I was released.
The first thing we did after Gwen got out was plan our wedding. We had not had a Christian wedding and decided that would be the first thing we'd like to do. So Jerry's wife took that under her belt and made all the preparations, and we were able to get married the very next day. Then we had to think about what we were going to do with our lives and with ourselves, and we decided we'd like to come back to the United States and finish school. It's really incredible that 2 ex-drug addicts could land in Miami with money for 1 telephone call and the clothes they were wearing and manage the things that we did. But we did go back to school, to North Park College in Chicago, and both graduated. Glenn graduated from the seminary, and I graduated from the college, and we got to do it on the same day, so that was kind of fun.
Praise the Lord.
Where's Perka? Oh, here she is.
Here she is.
The interesting thing about it all is that you never know where it's going to stop. And if you really believe God, you know it never is going to stop. His miracles go on forever. The most recent one is his father finding the Lord, too.
It worked. And that's the only thing I can say is it works. Worked for me, worked for Gwen, it'll work for everybody.
My dad kind of reached the end of his rope, and he drove to Washington to see my mom and told her that he wanted what she and Puka and I had. It wasn't anything we said, as it turns out. You know, it was what we were, and that he could see that there really was a difference.
We were talking on the phone, and just before we hung up, he said, "Dad, you know, it's the greatest thing that ever happened to me in my life." And through my mind was going him getting out of prison, him coming to North Park, and getting his degree and all that. And I was thinking about that, and he said, "No," he says, "when you found the Lord."
So now my husband and I are back together again.
This is something that is like a dream come true. My mom and dad are back together after 17 years of divorce. I don't think anything will ever surprise me again that the Lord does. I just really, never, ever expected to be able to marry my mom and dad, to rejoin them under God and bring our family back together. That is, to me, really unbelievable.
I wouldn't want to tell anybody that once you become a Christian, all your problems are over. That's really not true. I think it's just that you have help with those problems and you have a source of strength and hope you didn't have before. Going back to school with 3 kids after 12 years out of school was not easy. During those hard times, I think we probably wouldn't have made it if it wasn't for prayer and the fact that we knew there was something bigger than our problems seemed at that time. But he was with us all the way, and he's brought us this far. And I'm not naive enough to think that our problems are over. I know that we've got a lot of work to do, but it's the Lord's work. And with his help, I'm sure we can do it.
And now we're back in Latin America. We're here with a different purpose now. We're not running anymore. We're here to share God's love with the people who live here. We're here to share what Christ means to us. When I was being tortured, I hated the people that were doing it to me. But then when I became a Christian, I realized that I didn't have to hate those people that did that to me. Through my Bible studies and realizing what the Lord was all about, I realized that I guess I should kind of almost feel sorry for him, not in a patronizing kind of a way, but in a really true way. I really began to feel sorry for people who live that kind of a life. And I realized that those people, what they really need is they need to hear about Jesus. They really need to be confronted with the gospel in a way that they can understand it and respond to it, so they don't have to be like that. And I realized that they were already suffering. They didn't know the joy of the Lord, and somebody's got to tell them. The Latin Americans are just fantastic people. We've grown to love them so much. You know, their ways, their cultures. The overwhelming majority of them are really fine people. They're people who are caring and loving, hard workers, love their families and treat their kids well. But they don't know Jesus. And there's only so far you can go without him. And I know that if nobody goes to them, they'll never know. They'll never find out. And so that's why I feel that God's really called us to tell them about Jesus.
Muy bien, gracias. ¿Usted? Esposo, Diana. Buenas noches. Hola, hola, buen, ¿cómo le va? Bien, bien, por dicha, mi esposo.
Francisco, ¿qué tal? Bueno, pase adelante, entonces.
Hola, ¿cómo está, güey?
Bien, gracias.
No, en Sabanilla.
I really have a confidence in the Lord. I'm no biblical scholar by any means, but I know the basic message is there, and I think that I understand that and what it means that I'm supposed to do. I understand about caring for people and spending time with them and sharing God's love in that way.
A few years ago, a woman came up to me and she said, Jesus made my evidence disappear too. And I'd never thought of it that way before, but that's really true. That's the reason he did come. And I think that a lot of people have evidence against them. When you have evidence against you, it can put you in a prison that is harder to get out of than the one I was in. Are you in a prison today? It doesn't have to be that kind of a prison. There are a lot of other different kinds. There are prisons of broken relationships. There are prisons of dope. There are a lot of different kinds of prisons. And I just want you to know that if you are stuck, trapped inside of a prison, that Jesus Christ can release you. I had evidence against me when I was in prison, but he came and made it disappear. He can do that for you.